Hello and welcome to CLICKON Sports. I'm your host Harry Kettle, and today we are joined by a very special guest. This man is a former WWE European Hardcore and Tag Team Champion. He is a veteran of the wrestling business and has now transitioned into training the stars of tomorrow. It is none other than Al Snow. Al, how are you?
I'm doing very well. How are you, Harry? And thank you very much for having me on your podcast.
That's okay, man. I'm very well. And first things first, the Al Snow Wrestling Academy. When did the idea for starting your own academy first come into your head, and how pleased would you say you are on how it's been progressing?
Well, I had made a trip to England and met my partner, Simon Vanderwolf, at that time, and we got to discussing the possibilities of opening up a training center. And I really got interested in the idea once I realized that I had access to such quality trainers like Doug Williams, Johnny Storm, let me think here. Always makes me Joe Legend and Alpha Female, Jazzy Gabert, and then John Klinger, Bad Bones from Germany, Red Eagle, Thiago Miguel from Portugal. I had access to all these guys that had genuine experience. That's always the key when you're looking for someone to train you, or really to learn anything. Is you want to have someone who has enough experience to truly have an understanding and knowledge of what it is they're trying to teach and why they're trying to teach it to you. And it worked out great that we had, I had access to all these guys that we could bring into the academy and help them train. Now, from there, we grew, from just the one in London to where we now have Luke Doughton, who runs Slam Wrestling up in the Midlands, and then we have Andy Baker, who is in Cheshire. So we have affiliate schools there. Then we have one in Portugal, one in Greece, one in Denmark, one in Romania, and going to be opening up here in a couple of weeks, one in Chile.
So, how long would you say you've been associated with wrestling over in Europe, and more specifically wrestling in the United Kingdom?
Well, I've been associated with wrestling, as far as coming over and performing for years. And this has been my first foray really into, establishing a training center outside of the U.S. And it's going great. I couldn't be happier. My goal is, with the training centers, is to create a network of facilities around the world, in the UK, in Europe, in South America, all different places, so that way, philosophically, all the training is performed the same way. I send out a syllabus to all the different training centers. I work with the trainers and explain what's to be trained and what's to be taught and when and why and what purpose it serves. I come back every 3 or 4 months to visit and work with, for a week or so at a time, the trainers and the students themselves, and to ensure that things are being done the right way. Now, technique-wise, style-wise, I let each individual academy teach their own way. And what I'm hoping is by creating this network, let's say you start in London, and you can only develop so far staying in London. And then you need to go out and have more experiences. So, you contact your trainer, contacts the guys in Chile, work out the whys and wherefores, and then you travel to Chile and you spend a couple months or wherever you can afford to stay in Chile. You get a brand new, not only wrestling experience, different technique, different style. You get to wrestle in front of a different audience, but you also get a whole new life experience as well. And it's my hope that by doing this, that these students can have a better opportunity and be better prepared when they get if they get an opportunity with, say, like WWE, because WWE is an international platform and it goes all over the world. And if you already have had that experience of traveling all over the world and going from place to place and getting that experience, it allows you the better opportunity to take advantage of whatever is presented to you once you arrive in WWE.
Yeah. We recently spoke with Santino Marella, who actually mentioned that you played a role in training him in professional wrestling. Are there quite a few superstars, past and present, that people may not realise you've actually been associated with?
Oh, lots. Blue Meanie, Dan Severn. I always lose track. I know Steve Austin came and spent several days with me at one point when I had my school in Ohio to kind of get the ring rust off. Glenn Jacobs, D'Lo Brown. Let me think here. CM Punk spent time with me. Beth Phoenix, Katie Burchell. And I always forget her. Alicia Fox. Always forget her ring name because I know them by their, real names.
Yeah.
Cole Cabana spent time with me. Cody Rhodes. I can go on. I can go on and on. My time with WWE, that a lot of the guys that you see these days are guys that I had a part in, had a hand in, either from the ground up or further on. Not to mention Tough Enough and all the people that I had trained there. So I have quite a lot of wrestlers who are enjoying some level of success in professional wrestling that I've had played a factor in their development and training.
Yeah. So that's quite a resume you've got there. And as a coach, do you find yourself having more pride now when you see your students progress than when you personally achieve things in your own wrestling career?
Oh, absolutely. When it's a big thrill for me to watch my students succeed on, again, any level. I'm so proud of them, and I really believe and have determined that whatever legacy I leave behind in wrestling is going to probably be all of the people that I had a hand in training and trying to help develop so that they could take advantage of opportunities. I've been blessed to be, actually an in-ring performer for going on 36 years. And in that 36 years, I've made a lot of mistakes, screwed up a lot of times. And so that gives me a wealth of experience that I can pass on to other, aspiring wrestlers, to allow them to learn and understand where I made my mistakes and then prevent them from making them themselves.
Yeah. So, aside from professional wrestling, what are some of your favourite hobbies or interests that some fans may not actually be aware of?
Well, I love to read comic books. I'm obsessive about reading. Spent years reading whenever I travel, all the major pieces of literature and classic literature you're supposed to read, and then just ran out of that. Started reading mystery novels and suspense novels, and went through my Stephen King phase and got tired of him, and then just could not print books fast enough for me to keep up with me. So I went back to reading comic books because the writing was so well done, and I've always been a fan of them, and I've always loved them, and always will. And so I'm an avid reader.
And when you were switching tracks back to your career, when you were a part of something like the Job Squad, you had something of kind of like a cult following among some fans, with people like Seth Rollins, admitting to enjoying your work. How important do you think those unique storylines and gimmicks are for the development of a character or a wrestler?
Well, I think it's essential. You can be the greatest physically a gifted athlete in professional wrestling, but if you don't have a character, if you don't have an avenue that allows an audience to identify with you and relate to you and be able to, and this is the most important thing, it's the absolute essential thing. If they cannot describe you to their friends and family in a sentence or less, then you're no good. You're not going to be successful or as successful as you could possibly be. A case in point is if I simply say beer drinking, ass kicking redneck, who am I talking about?
Stone Cold.
Yeah, you see, that's why he was so successful. Is that you could turn to your friends and family and you could go, you've got to watch this show, or you got to come to me with this wrestling show. Come on, that's fake. Nobody wants to go to that. Oh, you got to go. There's this guy, and he is A, B, C, D, E. Boom, we're done. If you're not able to do that, no matter how talented this individual is, whether they're male or female, I can tell you right now, that wrestler will never be as successful as they possibly could be if they just took the time to develop that character and personality that they can demonstrate, not just backstage, not just to the ring, but throughout the entire presentation. Meaning, once the bell rings, you don't stop being the guy that you were. Because if you remember correctly, Steve Austin was always a beer-drinking, ass-kicking redneck. Didn't matter if he's backstage, didn't matter if he's on promos, didn't matter if he's walking to the ring, didn't matter if he was in the ring kicking butt, it didn't matter if he was in the ring getting his butt kicked, it didn't matter if he won, it didn't matter if he lost. He was always the same guy. Because you have to deliver what you sold to the audience. And otherwise, they will feel like they're jilted and haven't gotten what they paid for. And, that's the key to wrestling success, is to create that character. An audience will only believe in two things, and that's who you are and why you do it. And all the other stuff is inconsequential.
So, as we just said about interesting gimmicks and things that we've just mentioned, you obviously had a lot of interesting things to do in your time with WWE. How much creative freedom did you have back then?
Well, you always have creative freedom, because once you step into the ring, it's your responsibility to make yourself an attraction. That time in the ring is a commercial. It's an opportunity for you to sell your product, which is you. And a lot of times, including myself, made the mistake of on numerous occasions of not quite understanding that simple concept and not taking full advantage of that opportunity out in the ring. You'd be surprised at how much control a performer actually has once they step in the ring. Now, it may work, it may not work, but that's all on you, because there's nothing that anyone can do to help you, and there's nothing that anyone can do to hinder you once you step out in front of that audience. It's, the phrase that's used the most is to always ask for forgiveness, never ask for permission. Because if you ask for permission, they're always going to tell you no. If you ask for forgiveness, then you take your chances. You might have to come back and say, "Oh, I'm sorry, it didn't work. I screwed up," and then they, and you just take your shots. But you're free to do whatever you want to do, any way you want to do it. And you're right. I was involved in a lot of interesting storylines and things like that, and a large part of that was because my character was insane. I was free because of my insanity to do absolutely anything. A lot of guys say, "Oh, well, Al Snow was a comedy wrestler." I wasn't a comedy wrestler. I didn't do any of it for comedy. I did it to be entertaining. But my character was insane, and at that time, you could ask 9 out of 10 people if they thought that I was legitimately crazy, and they would have told you absolutely that I was completely out of my mind.
Well, you have some great little pieces of information and advice that we've already heard on our little chat here. But when you were maybe starting out in your career or within the first few stages and years of your career, was there anyone that gave you a piece of advice that really resonated with you and that you still maybe think about sometimes to this day?
Oh, there were, lots of guys that would give you advice back then. But they were always, it was, wrestling is not very much a verbal business. It's a very tactile business. And wrestlers have a very tough time verbalizing or trying to advise you, when they're speaking to you. They usually, speak in vague terms and brief ideas that, you've got to kind of almost learn on your own as you go. It's an interesting way to make a living, that's for sure. And I remember Jim Cornette, who I owe a lot to. Cornette, was always in my corner. Once we spent time together in Smoky Mountain, and there was a point where, I wasn't clicking in WWF when I first came in, not WWE, but WWF at the time. And he made sure that I got an opportunity as a Shinobi under a mask, and with Shawn Michaels. And I remember him standing there in the ring saying that he believed in me and knew I could do it. And that meant a lot,
You've had a great career in many respects, but is there anything that you look back on and think that you have regrets over, or are you someone who believes that everything happens for a reason?
Well, I think everything happens for a reason, but I have a lot of mistakes, a lot of missed opportunities, a lot of myself thinking, boy, if I only knew then what I know now, how much more I could have taken advantage of those opportunities, how much further I could have went, what kind of a career I could have at this present time still to this day if I'd have just taken advantage more of those opportunities that were presented to me. That at the time, sometimes you're in the forest so deep that you can't see the trees. You just and you don't even see the opportunities that are there until you get farther out and you realize that, oh, that was an opportunity. Oh, that was another one. Oh, I blew this one. Oh, I blew that one. But as far as regrets, I don't regret ever being in professional wrestling. I've gotten to live an amazing life and do amazing things and go amazing places. The only regret that I have is that at some point it'll have to come to an end. I'll have to move on, and that'll be hard. That'll be difficult to do. But going on to the next stage of life. But I'll figure it out.
How often do you actually find yourself watching the weekly content at the moment for things like WWE, TNA, or other wrestling promotions?
I don't. I'm very, very rare. Once in a while, I'll watch, but I don't really watch that often. Just simply because I don't get an opportunity to, and you were asking earlier about a important piece of advice, and people ask me this, I always relate to it. Is that years ago I was in Smoky Mountain. I was traveling with Sandy Scott, who was part of the Scott brothers. His brother was George Scott, who was like the booker for Vince McMahon in the '80s. They spent a lot of time with Jim Crockett Promotions in the Carolinas, and Sandy and I were traveling, and at the time, I'd go and watch wrestling tapes and wrestling matches and be just consumed with it. And I asked Sandy, I said, do you watch wrestling when you go home? And he's like, God, no, I don't watch it when I go home. And I go, why? And he goes, because I never want to let it become who I am. I always want it to be what I do, not who I am. And he related to me numerous people that it became who they were, and it just ate them up, destroyed them, ruined their lives. And he was like, if you were a plumber, do you go home and watch shows about plumbing? And I was like, well, probably not. He goes, yeah, because that's what you do. It's not who you are. And you want to get away from your job. You don't want to take it home with you and, live 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, being all involved about being a plumber. And He said it's the same for being a wrestler. So, you know, over the years, I've tried to adopt that more and more. I'm still a fan. I still love wrestling, all forms of it, you know, but I just try to keep it from becoming who I am and let it be what I do. And in fact, I've been, you know, such a fan of wrestling that, you know, that's why we created the collar and elbow brand, the apparel line, was to kind of embody that, you know, to embody the love for wrestling that we all have. So.
Yeah. So finally, as we kind of wrap things up, what do you believe the next 18 to 24 months have in store for Al Snow?
What do the next 18 to 24 months have for Al Snow? I couldn't tell you. I have no idea. I wish I knew. I'm sure it'll just be bigger and better. And, you know, I'm excited because every time I go through a transition, I come out the other side and go on to something even more exciting and more of an adventure than what I had before. So, you know, the next 18 to 24 months are going to bring some very interesting things, I'm sure.
Well, Al, it's been fascinating speaking with you today. I think a lot of people can learn from you just from listening to the things you say, and wish you the best of luck in the future.
Well, thank you very much, Harry. I really appreciate it. If anybody wants to follow me, they can on social media at The Real Al Snow, Instagram, Twitter, Facebook. And, you know, if you want to check it out, go to collarandelbowbrand.com. We have a lot of great apparel there that embodies what being a fan of professional wrestling really is.
Thanks, man.